I am really excited today to share with you kind of the story of the container registry's retention and expiration policy. It's a feature we just rolled out, and we're really excited about it. And it is great by itself, and it's also a really cool experience of how product management and product design can work together and utilize research to find solutions, even when there isn't a lot of user interface involved, which is kind of where UX tends to float. So I'm really excited to share that story with everyone. Quick background, the package stage, we currently are part of CI/CD, and our focus is taking bundled up versions of code, whether that be a package or an image or a couple of other options, storing them and then getting them ready for whenever they need to be released, whether that's pulled in by a pipeline or put out to production or anything like that. Tim Rizzi is the product manager, and we work together a lot on this, as well as Lori on the research side of things. So there was quite a few of us involved in getting this done. I'm really excited. So the initiative goals split into two things. We have a business goal and a user goal. The business goal, we have a really nice polished version that I'm not going to read for you, but it was basically, the idea is we needed to create a tool to help our users, as well as GitLab, manage the size of the container registry, because currently there isn't a good way to do that, and they keep growing larger and larger, and thus creating larger and larger storage costs, which nobody really likes to have. From a user goal perspective, a lot of the same things, but slightly different in that we also want to make sure that when we're removing unneeded images, we're keeping it organized and clean so that the experience of using the registry is nice and smooth. So we had two different goals there, which aligned really nicely. A history of this initiative, the Docker container registry, MVC came out for GitLab about 3 years ago. Shortly thereafter, this issue came up that has seen many, many iterations and different stories and all of that. It's the most popular issue for the package team, with 99 upvotes and almost 100 different discussions going on. Customers have reported that not having this kind of feature or this solution has had a really big impact on their business, and as well as their storage costs and operating costs. And there's lots of conversations that have happened around how to technically solve it or the experience of solving it. And for a long time, these kind of stalled out, usually around two different areas: the scalability of deleting the images, the backend structure just wasn't there, as well as not a solid understanding of what users in other companies actually want to see in terms of what rules they use to delete old images. And so we took this initiative, and Tim and I decided to break it down as we started growing the team. The two technical limitations that we kind of have to pay attention to is that revolve around the container registry, which is outside of the Rails environment that a lot of us work in. There were two main points that were causing some problems. One is that the APIs themselves built into the container registry were a little inefficient and turned out to be unstable as the registry started getting kind of large. And so it would result in calls being timed out, or things failing, and some things being half deleted and then half saved, which isn't a good solution for everyone. The other half of the technical problem we were running into is that garbage collection for the container registry requires for it to go into read-only mode. And for a lot of our customers, this would take 2 or 3 days for them to actually go through the process of removing all of the extra blobs and clearing the storage officially, leading to them not being able to work for 2 or 3 days, which isn't really an option for a lot of users. Of course, because we are user experience designers, the first thing we did was research with our users, which is my favorite thing to do. We started with qualitative data, so we did some in-person interviews. Tim and I decided to split this up a little differently. We worked on the discussion guide together, and then he went and did the actual interviewing. We're in different time zones, so when he was done, I took the recording, and I was kind of in charge of synthesizing the results. So we both got that kind of first-person view as to what this data meant and how it could come together. It by itself got 7 unique insights, as well as kind of a full understanding of what the retention and expiration policies and wants are for our users across the board, not just GitLab.com, but on-prem solutions and stuff like that. We also did a quantitative survey, which we sent out to a lot of people. If you notice, if you're paying really close attention, this is the same survey I mentioned last time about package details. We baked into this survey where if you responded saying, yes, I use the container registry, we asked a couple of additional questions to understand really how many images does your team create and how many of them do you actually end up using, as well as how do you generate those different tags? Do you manually build it on your desktop and upload it from the command line, or does your pipeline build a lot of your images for you? We came back with a validated problem, which felt really good because a lot of the conversations were stalling out because they didn't quite fully have the view of what our users were thinking. It kind of boiled down to 3 points. The storage cost was frequently the #1 reason customers were frustrated with this. We confirmed that users create a lot of images through the pipeline. So you can run a commit, that commit generates one image that's used to build another image, which is then used for testing, and then it's all added to the registry and never used again. So that's kind of adding a lot of cost for no gain for the organization. And we really confirmed that without the introduction of a better tool, there really isn't a good way to solve this. I had to laugh really hard. I think every presentation needs a comic or a GIF or a meme or something fun. But this one with the dog and saying everything is fine while the house is on fire was actually one of our users said, this is what I feel like. I know I need to solve this problem, and it's continually growing as a problem, but I can't do anything about it right now. We also learned some more specific things, but in terms of scale, one of the notes that was important for us is that some of our users were reporting that their registries were 50 terabytes. So that's about 100 different laptops all combined together. And then we took a look at GitLab's container registry, which is currently at 3.5 petabytes, which is insane, and almost 7,000 laptops full of data that a lot of it isn't getting used for our users. All of that relates to the storage costs and the operating costs, and that doesn't make anyone really excited about solving this problem. What we did from there is we designed an iterative solution. We recognized out of the gate that there wasn't a way for us to feasibly wait until we could solve all the problems and then move forward. It wasn't going to be good for us. It wasn't going to be good for our users. So we decided to try to solve for the solution as best we could now, and then create a plan moving forward with the GitLab iteration value. We had an in-person session with Tim and I, as well as Steve Abrams. He's a backend engineer on the package team. We all happened to meet in Denver. It was really cool. We sat in a co-working space. Tim and I and Steve were ready for 2 days straight of trying to figure out this problem. One of the great things that happened is because we had all of this data and this knowledge and this understanding, it only took us a couple of hours to really work it out, which kind of shows you the value of what happens when you have all the data you need and actually ask your users and gather that information, which felt good as a designer, I think. We sat down in the room and just kind of worked our way through 4 major areas. One, what was the dream state? What do we want this to be in 5 years when everything auto-magically works? That was basically the idea of, if I'm not going to use a tag again, we're going to remove it from the repository. We went through a couple of more questions. We reviewed all the data we had in terms of GitLab's impact and on-prem solution and stuff like that, as well as working with Steve to really understand the nuance of those technical limitations. And then we sat down and asked the real question. What is a realistic change that we can make now that will slow down the growth of this seemingly exponential problem? Because not only does it grow over time as you start building more images per team, but then as you start building out more projects that are using this, the bigger and bigger the problem becomes. The first iteration was just released, which I mentioned earlier, and I'm really excited about. We delivered for all projects starting in 12.8, moving forward, so they had very few images to start, so we didn't have to worry about the API. A set of default policies that protected our users that don't heavily utilize a lot of images, so they only upload 3 or 4, and they need to stay there for 6 months, for example. We created a bunch of policies to protect them while also making sure that no one registry can kind of grow out of scale. The policies are at the project level. That was a determination we made just based on the information we had heard from all of our users. They're a little different every time, so that's where we started. There is a plan to kind of expand outside of that. And I went out of order, so those are the 3 points. Right now, if you open a new project and you go to the CI/CD settings section, there's a place you can go and turn on the expiration policy, which is really exciting when you start to think about how involved the problem is. When we first released it, we kind of got 2 reactions from our users. A lot of them started out a little frustrated, and to be honest, Tim and I kind of expected that. We were releasing a new project or a new feature that would solve a problem for a lot of existing projects and customers, and then we didn't allow them to use it. So understandable frustration. Tim did an incredible job, dove into the issues where they started commenting and saying, this is our plan, this is why we did it this way, stay in contact and stuff like that. and their view of the situation really evolved. Users suddenly became excited to participate with us, they volunteered to do interviews, to do testing, for us to ask questions, stuff like that. And some of them even called out that the open source value is really exemplified here and how GitLab works, really shining through. And so they were excited to work with us instead of just being frustrated, which is where they started. Next up, some iterations. We have 3 main areas. We're going to continue to improve the registry API performance. This will allow us just to scale out to bigger and bigger projects without having to worry about things breaking halfway through, as well as creating throttle metrics so that the registry only handles so many deletions at a time, and we stay within our boundaries to make sure everyone has a nice, stable experience. We are going to introduce some additional features from the research that just expand the capacities. This includes selecting a branch and saying at the beginning when you merge it in, delete all of the images associated with this branch. So if it isn't master, we can just delete them because it was probably a test. Several of those kind of helped us out, as well as in the new container registry UI, which we're working on now, displaying more of that expiration and retention data so that users can stay up to date and really know, because we're doing a destructive action, we're deleting images, really making it transparent when we're doing that so no one's caught off guard when an image goes missing. Thank you everyone for taking the time to listen to me and my story. I was really excited to share it. And special thanks to Steve and Tim and Dwam and Nico and Lori and really everyone on Package. This was a big undertaking. It had a lot of open questions and a lot of opinions, and we were able to make a first step. And I feel like once you make that first step, every step can build on it and we can get feedback and everything is going to be fantastic. That is all I had. And just like before, I don't know who's next. So give me one moment.
We can figure it out. This is awesome. This is fascinating. Thank you so much for sharing this. I loved hearing you talk about how the team iterated. Can you talk a little bit about the timelines for the iteration? So how much time did y'all spend on research and design? How much time did it take to build the first MVC that y'all rolled out? And then how are you thinking about the next steps and kind of how they're going to fall on our timeline?
That's a really wonderful question. The research was a few months ago, and I know that makes it sound like it takes a really long time, and I don't want anyone to have that impression, just in case you did. It was really quick research. We had a different limitation where more of a staffing issue. The container registry is built using Go, and we didn't have a Go engineer, so we couldn't exactly work on it. Now that those counterparts are up to speed and are now really building heavily, I think we're going to be able to move faster. In terms of the time we started building it until now, that was about 2 months, 2 milestones to get the foundation as well as the initial UI. And then in the next 2 to 3 milestones, we hope to see a really big improvement in that wider adoption. Once we're done 2 or 3 milestones out, we're going to take a look at how many people are covered by the retention policies, how many are not, what's getting deleted, and kind of make a decision how to move forward from there. That makes sense?
That makes perfect sense. Thank you so much. That was really enlightening.